are we? Moses. Let's talk about Moses. Moses now is at the place where it's time for him to get 2 million Israelites out of Egypt. They have been stuck there now for 430 years. They've been under bondage to Pharaoh. They've been slaves to Pharaoh for all of this time. Moses' job is to go get them, bring them back into their homeland, which is what we know today as modern-day Israel. Pharaoh has said, no, I'm not going to let your people go, over and over and over. And God keeps throwing plague after plague after plague on Egypt because he's trying to get Pharaoh to let his people go. And after 9 plagues, he still would not until the 10th, which we learned last week. The 10th and final plague was this: if you do not take a lamb and you take its blood and put it over the doorpost, then your firstborn in your household will die. The firstborn animal, the firstborn child, whatever that may be, will die on this final plague. And that is exactly what happened on that night. And because the Israelites did not listen to God and Pharaoh did not listen to God, the historians say there was up to 200,000 deaths in one night. So that's where we left off last week. At this particular point, the Egyptians are completely done. They're just like, you know what? We're done. We want the Israelites out of our country. Everything has changed. The landscape of Egypt has changed. With all the plagues that have come on there, you've got frogs and hail and locusts and destroying the plants. And everything has changed in Egypt up to this point. And now they're finally getting to the point of saying, we're done. Please leave our land. Here's what I want you to know on our first screen. The Bible is a fascinating, big, beautiful story from cover to cover. But unfortunately, most people don't know that because they just think like, oh, the Old Testament's boring and it's just all about a bunch of rules and regulations and I just don't understand it. It doesn't make sense to me. And so what happens is nobody reads their Bible and they don't understand what this big picture Bible is all about. Now, I'm going to show you a couple really corny videos today, but this will give you an idea of what people think about the Bible in our first little video. So watch this.
So, I attended church when I was a kid, so, I already know what it says. Yeah, I kind of got away from it when I went to college or whatever, but, at some point, you gotta focus on books that are, necessary.
When you become an adult, you have to focus on real-life issues. I mean, hearing about the Bible when you're young can help you figure out morals and the like, but when you're older, the Bible becomes less relevant.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You're suggesting that maybe I read the Bible instead of taking care and playing with my children's and watching TV and catching up on my stories. And let's not be forgetting about Facebook now, because I got to be keeping people up on my opinion because people need to be hearing it.
I see the Bible as more like classic literature. Maybe everybody should read it at some point, but does reading the Bible make you a better person? That's hard to prove. I mean, there's plenty of good people who don't read the Bible and bad people who do read the Bible. So I think a lot of people, even Christians, wonder if the Bible's even worth reading at all.
Well, sure, I'm a Christian, but the thing is, the Bible can be so boring. It's so hard to stay focused when you're reading about shepherds and sheep and stuff. And the list of people's names really, then it's the guilty conscience. It can really, really get in the way with how I really want to live my life. You know what I mean?
You don't have kids, do you? When would I magically come up with enough leisure time to sit back and concentrate on any book, much less the holy book? If it's not the kids, it's my husband. Honey, have you seen my keys? Food, laundry.
So why do I gotta read the Bible? That's why I go to church, duh. My pastor preach real good so I can understand him. And shoot, he's a professional. I'm just gonna depend on him. He can do it. Besides, that's what he gets paid to do anyway.
Oh, okay. No, that just every one of those people just stabbed my heart. Is because I honestly, welcome to the world. That's what people think, and they don't understand that this is this great, big, beautiful book that tells you everything you need to know about life and why you're here and why you were created and what your purpose is and where you're going to go if you die. And there's so much into it. And that's what we're learning with the life of Moses that is part of this big, big picture. Here's what I want us to realize, that if you don't read the Bible, and please start, but understand this, that this is why we teach Bible here. This is our next screen here. It is the one truth that we have to live by. Last week, we talked a lot about the culture and false religions, and the culture is determining what is truth now. And as Christians, we have to stop and say, that's not really true. Look at this verse in John 17:17. Jesus says this, sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So everything in this book that we have, everything from cover to cover, is the only truth that there is in this world. And if that's true, we have to know it so we can come up against and say, no, what you're telling me is not the truth. When Josh McDowell was here a couple weeks ago, he defined truth for us. And he said, truth has to be the same as the original. And so this is God's original. And so when you have someone knocking on your door, or the people out here, like we talked about last week, the Jehovah's Witnesses that are out there, and they're just like, we need to add something to this, then you have to realize anything outside of this is not truth. And so we have to know the truth. That's why we teach Bible. It's so important for us. Along with truth, here is our next verse, Psalm 119. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. So you and I read the Bible so that God can lead us and guide us through this life. I always say this for the next screen. The Bible is a blueprint for life. If someone's going to build something, you have to have a blueprint to know what goes where and how this fits together. And that's what the Bible is for us. This made me laugh about blueprints. There was a do-it-yourself catalog firm. They got a letter from one of their customers, and here's what they said. I built a birdhouse according to your stupid blueprint. It not only was way too big, but it kept blowing out of the tree, signed Angry. The firm replied and said, Dear Angry, we're sorry about the mix-up. We accidentally sent you a sailboat blueprint. He said, but if you think you're mad, you should read the letter from the guy who came in last in the sailboat race because he got your blueprint, your birdhouse blueprint. And I thought that was so adorable. Here's the difference between the Bible, though. Here's our next screen. The Bible is alive. It's a book that attaches to our soul and changes us and helps us to see this world that we live in through the eyes and the lens of God and how He created everything. Hebrews 4:12 says this, for the word of God is living and active and sharper than any two-edged sword. That's why it's so incredibly important. It's alive. It's living. It attaches to your soul. It changes you and I from the inside out. We read something and we're like, it changes us. That's what it's supposed to do. The Bible is not a novel like a Grisham novel. It's not a textbook like a science or a math textbook. It's actually a love story from God Himself. And the Old Testament that we're talking about right now with Moses is all about God's love for this nation, Israel, who's been stuck in Egypt for all of these years. And God goes and gets Moses to go get them out, get them to their homeland. You see you've got Joshua and Judges and the majority of the whole Old Testament is all about God's love for this nation and how they walk away from Him and how He disciplines them and then they come back and then He rescues them. And it's this great big epic story. And the accumulation comes when Jesus is born, through the lineage of the Israelite people. And that's what it's all about. The whole Old Testament points to a time when Jesus would come to save you and I from our sins. So that's why we have to know the whole story, big picture. One day there was a man who was walking along a country lane with his dog and his mule, and a big truck came around the corner, hit him, and knocked them all into the ditch. The old man decided he's going to sue the truck driver for what happened, and they were in court. And so the old man was on the stand, and he was getting ready to tell them the story. But the defense attorney said to him, I need you to answer yes or no. That's the only thing you can answer. Here's my question to you. When the man who driving the truck came up to you and asked you, are you fine? You said, yes, I'm perfectly fine. Is that yes or no? And the man said, well, me and my dog and my mule were walking. And the defense attorney said, no, I want a yes or a no. And he said, well, you don't understand. When me and my dog and mule were walking, and he said, Judge, he won't answer yes or no. And the judge said, it sounds like he has a bigger piece of this story that he needs to tell us. He said, go ahead and tell us the story. And he said, well, me and my dog and my mule were walking along. The truck came around, hit us, knocked us into the ditch. The man gets out, sees that my dog is badly injured. He goes to his truck with his shotgun, gets his shotgun out, shoots my dog dead. He said, then he walks over to my mule and sees he has a broken leg and shoots him dead. And he said, then he shows up to me and he says, how are you? He said, so yes, I did tell him I was perfectly fine. But see, we have to know the whole story. That's the thing. And when you and I open our Bible, we need to know the whole story. Here's the whole story. And here's our next screen. God is in control of everything. We have to get that. He is sovereignly in control about everything. And that's what I want to talk about today. That we're going to see that through just these pieces of the puzzle with Moses. And here's where I want to start with the next screen. God controls the hearts, thoughts, and minds of people. We see this in Exodus 12. We'll pick up our story here. Exodus 12:31 says this, during the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses, and this is after everyone's dead, said, up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds. In other words, get out of Egypt. Pharaoh said enough was enough. Here is a lesson for all of us. If you are here and you're fighting God, I want you to know something. Every time someone comes against the God of the universe, you will lose. You just will. And Pharaoh, as important as he was in Egypt, he finally came to that realization that God is way more stronger and way more in control than I ever gave him credit for. Verse 33, the Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we're going to die. But look at this next verse. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver, gold, and for clothing. Moses told them, all of the Israelites, go to your Egyptian bosses or friends or whoever's in the neighborhood, knock on their door and say, I need your gold and I need your jewelry and I need clothes. Now, I'm going to ask you, if somebody came knocking on your door and said, hey, can I have the PIN number to your savings account? Hey, you know that big, beautiful diamond wedding ring that you have? Can I have that? Hey, you know that beautiful silver necklace you wear? Can I have that? You'd be like, no. Okay, but here is what happens. God said, go tell them, because I am going to change their minds and their hearts to just give you anything that you need. I want you to know that that is exactly how intricately involved that God is in your life and mine. Look at verse 36. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. Look at the first few words of that. The Lord made. The Lord had made. The Lord had made. The Lord does that. God is that big that he changes the hearts and minds of people, and he just does. That's how he works in this world. I'll tell you how this worked out with us. For those of you that come here, you've been knowing this for the last couple years. My husband's been working on this really, really big business deal for the last probably 2 years. He ended up getting to the point where we knew we needed to do something with our company. And so he's been working on this to the point where this company wants to do some stuff with us, and it's this long, involved story. And they said, all right, this will close in like 2 months. So we had like a specific amount of attorney's fees that we knew we could afford, and we knew that it needed to close in a couple months. The couple months turned into a year. The attorney's fees went from what we thought to 7 times that amount. It was this huge monster deal. By the time it was getting to the end, we knew we had to get rid of this. We had to do something, and we had to get this deal, had to get through. So it came down to last July. Rob and I are up in Flagstaff. It's Thursday. Friday morning, this deal is going to close. Now, you have to understand, the reason why this took so long is there's 4 countries involved in this deal. Attorneys from all over the world are involved in this deal. So we have Thursday, we get a phone call. Everyone's going to be in the office, 6 a.m. Everyone's calling in. Everything's going to be finally done. We were so excited, and our attorney called and said, oh, we got to get one last signature. And the guy's pretty close to you, so maybe just go up to a restaurant. It's about an hour away from you, and he'll bring you the papers and just bring it tomorrow. Great. So we drive, and we get to this little town, and we go eat, and we never heard from this. He's a partner. He was a partner. He's a small partner. And he said, so he never showed up. So we decided to get a hotel room because it's getting late, and we said, well, we'll just wait here, and he can just drop it off at the front hotel room. The attorney calls at about 7:30 and says he refuses to sign. And we were like, what do you mean he refuses? Yep, he doesn't want to sign this. And we're just like, do you have any idea how devastating this is for every single person for the last year? Yeah, he just doesn't really want to sign it. And we just were so shocked. We went to bed, and I said, Rob, I just know God well enough to know he either doesn't want this deal to go through, and he's turning this man's heart this way, or if he does want this deal, he's going to have to turn his heart back this way. And the great part of knowing God is knowing that he's that big, and he can turn it however he wants this deal to go. And at this point, we just didn't know. We slept like babies that night. I was shocked. We woke up at 4 in the morning. Our attorney stayed at his office until 9:30. He called us about 10, and he said, I can't get them to budge. It's not happening. And we're just like, what are we going to do at 6 o'clock in the morning when all these attorneys from all over are calling in to have the final paper signed? We had no idea. So we get up in the morning, and we leave about 4. So we're driving, and we're listening to the Christian radio station. Here, let's put this verse up really quick. Proverbs 21:1. Here's why I know this. The king's heart is like a channel of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he wishes. Your heart is in the hand of the Lord. He's going to turn it wherever he wants. Your husband's heart is in the hand of the Lord. Your child's heart. You can't change people. I can't change people. But God can, because he's that big and he's that intricately involved. So the next morning we get up and we're driving down and we're talking. We're just like, I have no idea what to do. Mercy Me's song, Even If, came on. Here's some of the words. But what will I say when I'm held to the flame like I am right now? And we felt like we were literally hovering over the flame. We had no idea what we were going to do. And here was our prayer. God, I know you're able, and I know you can. God, you can change this man's heart in 1 iota of a second. I don't know why you're not. Save through the fire with your mighty hand. But here was the point we got to. But even if you don't, my hope is in you alone. I know the sorrow, I know the hurt would all go away if you would just say the word. But even if you don't, my hope is you alone. And that's the point that we have to get to in our life when we just say, God, here's the deal. I know you can change that person's heart. I know you can change my husband's heart who's getting ready to divorce me. I know you can change my boss's heart to keep me on God is that big. And when we get that in our life, it will literally give us peace, and it will change everything about us. That morning as we were driving in, about 5 o'clock, we got a call from our attorney. He said, I just got a call from the other attorney's office. And he says, well, we're just thinking about this. And our attorney said this, I want you to know that my clients are Christians. And they're beginning to get the impression that maybe God does not even want them to do this deal. And that changed the tune of it. Well, no, let me call my client, because I'm telling you, there's going to be a big lawsuit if he doesn't sign. Wait. Let me talk to him. 5 minutes later, he said, you'll have your signature. We walked into the attorney's office at 5 till 6. The signature came in and was there at 6 o'clock. Okay. All that to say is that God is that big to take someone's heart and mind, and this was a great reminder to me that yeah, it was stressful. It wasn't even that stressful. It was pretty stressful. But that moment, it was that moment of saying, you know what, God, I know you're in control of this. And there's peace in our life when we can really, really grasp that. We're selling our house right now. I think I told you that. And God keeps moving in and out what we're going to do. And originally we were going to sell it to a church, and then God changed our minds and hearts on that. It was really weird how that happened. And so Rob was, the other day, he was thinking, and he said, you know what, let's make our house into assisted living. Because it has room for all these different places. And I said, that's awesome. Because that way we can just move back in here. And I said, the fun part about that is that like in about 20 years, the kids will be like, oh, mom and dad need to go to assisted living. They'll bring us back here and we'll be like, why does this place look so familiar? Like we won't even remember it, but that'll have been our home for the last 25 years. But it was so funny. But that's what I know. I just know that God is that big to either bring along a buyer or open the doors for assistance. Like I just don't worry about stuff anymore, and I don't have to because I understand that God is that big. And if you are a follower of Jesus, He's intricately involved in everything in your life. And that's what I'm saying. If you don't know Jesus today, you better get on board on the Jesus train. That's what I say on that. Dusty he dated a girl a while back, and he said. He really liked her, and then one day something happened, and he said, I don't think I like her anymore. And he said, why is that? I liked her yesterday, I don't today. And I said, you know what, that's what God does. He changes your heart. And he said, I said, if this is not the right girl for you, He's going to change your heart. And I said, you know what, He could have just as well changed her heart to not like you. You know, that's just the way it works. But if you go through life like that, it gives you peace when you don't get the job. You're like, well, God could have changed their heart, but He didn't, so I'm not supposed to work there. Oh, that guy never asked me out again. Well, that's because that's not the guy for you. Like if you can get this in this big overall picture, your life will be completely changed. I want us to look at life like this. Look at our cute little video here. Imagine us living like that, yeah, we live our life here, but who's really in control, which is a great point. I love that. That made me laugh. All right, so let's talk about how God does that. How does He do that? How does He change our minds and His heart? Kent Crockett wrote a book called The Sure Cure for Worry. And he said, usually God changes our hearts and our minds so naturally that we don't even recognize that it's Him that's doing it until we look back and we say, oh my gosh, look how God moved that person and to get me to the place where I am today. So he tells two stories, and I'm going to tell them both because they're really important to realize that this is how big God is. First story is about Pete Schultes. He was 26 years old. He was engaged to a woman by the name of Linda. Linda invited him to her church in Huntington, West Virginia. And he did not want to go. He's like, I don't want to go. And she said, no, please come. I told friends you would be there. So he ends up going there. Now they're engaged. They sit there in the front row. Before the church service starts, there's a young teenage girls choir singing in the front row, or up in the front. He's just sitting there listening, and all of a sudden it's as if God shouts with a megaphone into his brain and into his ear. And this is what he heard. You are going to marry the girl on the far left. He was so shocked, he looks up and he's thinking, I'm engaged to Linda. Okay, the girl on the far left is like 15. Like, she's like, what are you even talking about? Like, that's the weirdest thought. And then I started worrying, and he's like, God, maybe I'm not supposed to marry Linda. Is that what this is all about? Like, what's going on? And he forgot about it. A couple weeks later, Linda and him, they were talking, and they decided that they shouldn't get married and they shouldn't be engaged, so broke off the engagement. He said never once did he ever think about what God had told him in that church that day. He ended up moving away he moved to Charleston, West Virginia. He became an associate pastor at a church. It had been 8 years since he broke off his engagement. He really wanted to get married. He kept dating people, but nothing ever happened. And he was 34 and still single. So one day he pulls into his church parking lot. Just at the same time, another car pulls in, and this girl gets out. And she said, "Hi, my name's Robin." She said, I just moved here, and I'm trying to figure out if I want to go to this church. I have a meeting with your pastor. He's like, "Great." Goes in, whatever. She starts coming to the church. So she and Pete start hanging out. And one day out of the blue, she said, "Hey, can you come back home with me and come to my church in," what was the first place? Huntington, West Virginia. And all of a sudden, he stopped and he was like, "Wait a minute." He said, "I feel like I've been to that church before." And he said, "Is it the brick building?" "Yeah." He said, "Did you have some kind of a teen choir?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah." She goes, "I was in that." She said, "My sister and I, we always stood to the far left." And he realized that Robin was the girl that God told him 8 years before that he was going to marry. And they end up getting married. How's that? That's how big God is. And I started thinking, okay, that takes a lot of chess moves on God's part to make sure that like she grows up and she's like 24, old enough to marry him, that he's at the same parking lot that she is, that there's a lot of steps that have to be involved in that. And yet, God is that big in your life and mine. The second story is about Max Wilkins. Max is the pastor of Family Church in Gainesville, Florida. He knew when he was younger that God was calling him to be a pastor, but he knew he needed to go to seminary. He also knew he didn't have enough money. So he decided to take the first step and apply at Candler, Candler School of Theology, there it is. So he has that summer to get a job, and he got offered 2 jobs. One was as an assistant to a pastor, and he would make enough money at that job to pay for his first semester at Candler. The second job was a camp. He would make 35 cents a week. And those were his jobs. Well, in his mind, it's like, duh, like, okay, I'm going to get the assistant pastor job. The problem is that God started changing his heart and his mind and his thinking, and he started feeling very, very uncomfortable about this one job. And his heart was more towards the 35-cent job, but he had no idea why. It made no sense whatsoever. And it reminded me that as a Christian, that remember, the Holy Spirit lives within you. And when he doesn't want you to do something, he's going to start moving on your heart and moving in your life to make you feel uncomfortable about something. I'm getting ready to do something in March. And it was all planned and everything's great. And then the other night, I woke up in the middle of the night. And I started feeling uneasy. And I started feeling uncomfortable. And I couldn't go back to sleep. And I kept saying, "God, I don't know what the problem is here. Like, this isn't a bad thing. What's the problem?" And I woke up in the morning and said, "I'm not comfortable." And Rob said, "Then you need to not do it." And I stopped. The whole thing is done. Not doing it anymore. And I don't know why. There's no logical reason except that I'm uncomfortable and God knows what he's doing. And if I'm a child of God, Romans says that if you're a child of God, that God leads and guides you. And so I'm like, all right, for some reason I'm not supposed to do that, and we're just going to go with that. Cheyenne dated a guy one time, and she called us, and she said, "I'm breaking up with him." I'm like, "Why?" "I don't know, I'm not comfortable." And see, when you get that uncomfortable feeling, then you have to take that as a follower of Christ, that God is doing something in your life, and he's moving you someplace different than you think. Always listen to those gut feelings when it comes to God. So Max ended up taking the camp job because he just knew he just didn't feel comfortable taking the other job. By the end of the summer, he had made $5. School starts in 2 weeks. He's going to seminary. He's like, what am I going to do? Now he didn't want to go home and tell all of his friends because they're going to be like, "Oh, you should have listened to us and you should have prayed more about it." And Christians get. Anyway. He decides to go down and have a come to Jesus meeting with Jesus at the lake. So he goes down there and he literally yells at God. And he starts screaming and saying, "Lord, I don't know what you're doing to me." He says, you're the one who called me to go to seminary. You're the one who told me to take this job here. And now, 2 weeks before school starts, I have no money, and I'm trying to be obedient, and I'm trying to listen to you, and you're not coming through with me, and I'm really frustrated. Here's what he said. This is your problem now. It's not mine anymore. I did what I thought you told me to do, and now you better figure it out if you want me to go to seminary. At that moment, he hears something behind him and realizes a woman's been sitting on a bench behind him. He never saw her, okay? She said, hi, my name is Emily Ann. You seem a little distraught, okay? Like, what's going on? And so he tries to explain to her. He said, I'm really frustrated with God right now because I feel like he's called me to seminary and I'm supposed to be in the ministry, and yet all this happened. And she said, you want to go to Candler? She said, that's so interesting. She said, I have friends who are endowing a scholarship at that seminary. And she said, give me your contact information and I'll pass it on to them. He walked away saying, hey, she doesn't even look like she has friends that can endow a scholarship, let alone know people like that. So he said, I didn't really believe her. But 2 weeks later, he got home to a letter that said this, Dear Max, our dear friend Emily Ann spoke very highly of you and your calling to ministry. We trust her implicitly. Based on her recommendation, we are pleased to award you an all-expense-paid scholarship to Candler School of Theology. The scholarship not only paid for 3 years in seminary, but gave him extra money for living expenses so he didn't have to get a part-time job. For the last 2 decades, he has been a pastor and a preacher involved in the United States, but also heavily in foreign missions, sharing Jesus with the world. And all that because he had a gut feeling that God did not want him to do something, and he took a job for 35 cents that made no sense whatsoever, and yet he did it. Here's what I want to say, is that when you and I surrender our lives to Jesus, and I mean surrender, God, my life is yours. You move me wherever you want. That's what being a Christian is. Say, no, I say this all the time. We live in this stupid world that says, oh, ask Jesus in your heart, live however you want, and you're fine, you're going to heaven. That's not what being a Christian is. Being a Christian says, God, I'm giving you my life. What do you want to do with me? I'm here to serve you. That's what following Jesus is all about. And when that happens, when you're surrendered, you're opening your Bible, you're reading your Bible, you're listening, you're going to church, you're listening to sermons, you're hearing God's voice, and now he's moving you to different places to where you can serve him. Here's what Kent Crockett says. I think I put it on the screen. I don't know. There we go. How does the Lord guide you to the appointed places without your knowledge about it? Sometimes he'll drop an idea into your mind that you fail to recognize is coming from him. It seems to be your own thought. You decide to go to a particular place, never realizing that he's leading you there. His guidance is so natural, you're completely oblivious to the fact that God is directing your steps. The mind of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps, Proverbs 16:9. As you start taking these steps, he watches over you from heaven and orchestrates circumstances so that you will arrive at the correct destination at the right time. That's how awesome God is. In Acts, we see this. When Stephen is recounting this whole story about Moses, his journey through, the burning bush and getting to Egypt, he says this in Acts 7:23. When he, meaning Moses, was approaching the age of 40, it entered his mind to visit his brethren. When Moses is living in the palace under being Pharaoh's, adopted grandson, he's looking and all of a sudden the thought comes into his mind and says, maybe I'll go visit my Israelite buddies. It all started, this whole journey of the wilderness with Moses, all began with God putting a thought into his mind. John 7:30 says this about Jesus. As they tried to seize him, when they were trying to arrest him, no one laid a hand on him because his time had not yet come. See, that's the great part about being a follower of Jesus, is that you can rest assured that nothing's going to happen until it's the right time. You're trying to get pregnant and you can't get pregnant. Well, it's probably not time yet. You're trying to get that job and they're not calling back. Well, it's probably not time yet. You want to get married, but there's no guys on the scene. It's just not time yet. And when you come under the authority of God, it's like, I'm just going to wait for God to open the doors. That's what he promises to do. We also believe a few other things. Deuteronomy 3:22 says this, do not fear them, for the Lord your God is the one fighting for you. We believe that God fights for us. That's what the Bible says. God changes people's hearts to make them love you or fear you. Look at this, Deuteronomy 2:25. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under the heavens, who when they hear the report of you will tremble and be in anguish because of you. Now remember this, the Israelites are wandering along, they've been slaves. They're not warriors, they're not trained to go fight. And yet God made all the surrounding nations terrified of this people group. God does that. Deuteronomy 31:8 says this, the Lord is the one who goes ahead of you. He will be with you. He will not fail you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. I want you to know that he gets us places by putting things in our mind and giving us desires, but here's what you have to really, really grasp. God never puts something in your mind that goes against what he's already said. He never will do that. If you get a knock on your door and it's from a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness and you're like, oh, I have a thought to join the church, God's already spoken against that, so the answer's no. If you get an idea in your mind like, oh, my husband's not very nice, but that guy wants to have an affair, and it's an idea in my mind. No, God's already spoken against it. If you want you get an idea to steal from your company or divorce your husband without any biblical grounds whatsoever, and it's just a thought, always know that God has already spoken on it. It's not from God. It's Satan wanting to destroy your life. That's why you have to know the Bible, and that's why you have to be able to distinguish the two. We have to get to that point where anything that God wants to do with our life, we say, we're in. We need to keep him always on the throne of our life. Now, here's a cute little video. David thinks it's stupid, but it's fine. Okay, I'm sorry. I know, that was totally tacky. Totally get that. But there's a good point to that, okay? That's why it's important to keep God on the throne of your life, because our life can be run over and destroyed. If we don't, that's why we always have to make sure that happens. Now, here's what I want to tell you. It was really awesome that God is that much in control that he gave Pete a wife and that he gave Max a scholarship. But for some of you, that's not very comforting to you because you're just in a world of hurt. You just got really, really bad news. And the bad news says this, your life will never be the same, the doctor says. Well, actually, what's left of it? And you're saying, well, wait a minute. I thought God was in control of all of these things. So you're telling me God is in control, that I'm going to be sick and die? Some of you here are dealing with your 25-year-old child that has cancer. Some of you just found out that your husbands are addicted to porn and you don't know what you're going to do. Some of you have found out that your child has just come out and said they're gay and you have no idea what to do. Some of you found out your company's going bankrupt, you're losing your job. And you're just looking around saying, where is God? Because if God, you tell me he's in control of all these things, why in the world are these bad things happening to me? I don't know that I want to believe and put my faith and trust in a God who allows bad things to happen. I don't think I want that God. If God is sovereign, why doesn't he stop bad things? He could have stopped the 10 plagues over Israel or Egypt. Think of the heartache that was going on in Egypt at this time, and yet God never stopped it. And we're just like, why is that? Why didn't God stop that accident with the drunk driver? Here's what the dictionary says about accident. Here's the definition. maybe dictionary defines accident as an unforeseen event or one without an apparent cause. When you are a Christian, you know that there is no such things in this world as an accident, that something happens as an unforeseen cause. There was a cowboy who went to buy some life insurance. The broker said, well, have you had any accidents lately this past year? And he said, well, not really accidents, but I was kicked by a horse and chased by a raging bull and bitten by a snake. The agent said, well, weren't they just accidents? And he said, no, pretty sure the horse, the bull, and the snake did it all on purpose. But even the cowboy gets this. There are no such things as an accident. Here's our next screen. Here's what you and I need to know. That He is in control over even the bad things that come in my life. We got to get this, because we live in a world where bad things are going to happen. And if I think for 1 second that God is not in control of that, I'm going to be a mess. I trust a God that knows when something bad is going on in my life, and I trust that He's going to do something with this. The question is why? What's our next screen here? What is the purpose? And here is usually God's purpose. Everything that happened in Egypt with all the plagues was for one purpose. Yeah, it was bad, but God was trying to point the Egyptians to the one true God. That's what He was trying to do. He tries to point people. Yes, we live in a fallen world. We just do. It's going to be that way until the end of time. But God says, I can take those bad things and use those bad things to point them for good and point them to people coming to Jesus. God wants to do this. Here's our next screen. He wants to redeem our suffering. He wants to use whatever you're suffering, the bad in your life, and turn it into good to make an eternal difference in people's lives. Here is a story up here we'll read. Karen Tippett, an author, mother of four, and co-worker with her pastor, Jason, went home to Jesus on March 22nd after a long battle with breast cancer. As the cancer spread, Kara courageously embraced her situation, trusting in a sovereign God. She believed that cancer was not the point, but Jesus was. Now, I want to stop there. I want us to get to that point in here, that the divorce is not the point, but Jesus is. Your sickness is not the point, but Jesus is. The accident, whatever just happened, is not the point, but Jesus is. And if we can always get that in our mind, no matter what happens, Jesus is the end game. We want our friends and our neighbors and our family and our coworkers to be able to see Jesus amidst the pain. As Kara and her family processed what God was calling them to live out, she invited her community to join her journey through this seemingly impossible ordeal. How would she trust God in the midst of sickness? And then how would she trust God in the midst of dying? Fall of 2014, David Cook published her story, The Hardest Piece. Here's what she said. She refused to be defined by cancer, considered every moment a gift and an opportunity to learn more about grace and trusting God. She believed suffering was not an absence of beauty, but an opportunity to understand God's love on a deeper level. See, most people turn away from God when bad things happen, but you and I, as followers of Jesus, can come under this authority of God and say, you know what? Yes, bad things are happening, and I have cancer, or I'm sick, or whatever it is, but I'm going to say, all right, God, what beautiful things can you bring out of this? We saw this with Nabil Qureshi, who, of course, we know just passed away a couple months ago. At 30-some years old, and I still, like I tell you every week, I can't believe that God took him home. But here's what he said when he was alive. He said, it was the times of suffering that I feel the closest to God. It's the times of suffering when people pray more, and it's the times of suffering that your faith and my faith will go to a completely different level. So the question we have to ask is, so does God cause the suffering in my life? And the only conclusion that we can come to is this: He either causes it or He allows it. Those are the two. If God is in control and we're just like, oh, how did that happen? And God's going, well, you know what? I'm sorry, I couldn't do anything about it. We had a friend of ours that her grandson died of SIDS, and I'll never forget her saying, I just feel like God just turned His back and just wasn't watching. And I said, that's not true. Because God either allows it or He doesn't cause the bad, but He will allow it, but there's always a purpose. That's our next screen here. If he allows it, there is a purpose. God did not send you down here and just say, you know what, there's no purpose in your life, there's no purpose in your suffering. He didn't do that. And we know that because he did this. Instead, this is our next screen, he became one of us. He literally became one of us. And those of you that are dealing with a lot of pain and hardship, and whether it's physical or mental or whatever it is in your life, I want you to know that he feels your pain too. God did not drop us down here and say, oh, that's so sad you're going through that. Hope you can get through it. He doesn't do that. He suffers along with you because he suffered himself. For some of you that lost a son to death at an early age, God says, so did I. I know how it feels. I'm assuming most of you have never seen your child tortured to a point of near death where they hung on a cross, but God did, and he felt the pain of watching his son do that. For those of you that have children that are rejected or bullied at school, you're just like, why doesn't God see? And God says, I see exactly what you're going through, and I feel your pain. But God sent Jesus and allowed the pain. Think about this. If he did not allow that pain in his life, you and I would be hopeless and never get a chance to go to heaven. But because of the pain, God turned that pain into something good that says, look, if you ask Jesus in your life, he took your sins on himself on that cross, and now you have a way to get to heaven. Without the pain, nothing good would have happened. Whatever you're going through, here's our next screen. God feels your pain because he felt it too. You and I have to know that we live in a world where there's sickness and there's death and heartache and tragedies and ISIS and crazy people shooting guns out of hotel windows and terrorists blowing up trains. That's the world that we live in. And God can stop it anytime he wants to. But very rarely does he step in and change things. Instead, he takes the bad and he redeems it to something good. We see it no better. I was listening to Ravi Zacharias the other day, and he was talking about, I didn't realize this, but he's had a really bad back for probably, 30 years, I guess. So bad that where he won't take medicine because he's so smart that his brain he says, I can't take medicine because he doesn't want to cloud anything in there. So he lives with the pain. And he said there was days when he would sit in his car and just sob because it hurt so bad. And God never did anything about it. And I think it's been really recently, someone called him from another country and said, Ravi, God just spoke to me this morning. And he said, I want you to tell Ravi this about his ministry. And so it was something. And he said, but then God also told me something that I don't even know what it means. So he said, I'm going to tell it to you, and I literally don't know what this means. He said, God told me to tell you that he was going to take care of 3, 4, and 5. And Ravi was so shocked, he said 3, 4, and 5, and he said, yeah. And he said, ever since I was however big, he said, the L3, L4, they're what, discs, or I don't know what they are on your back. He said they've always been bad, and that's been giving him problems. And he said 2 days later, he was going through an airport. He sat down to tie his shoe and bent over to tie it. For the first time in his life in so long, he was pain-free, and God healed him. And you see that, and you say, okay, God, that's awesome. But then on the other hand, you see Nabil. And you're saying, God, he's 32 or 33 years old, and he's brilliant, and he's a mind just like Ravi, and he could take over Ravi's position when Ravi gets too old. Why aren't you keeping around? And God did not step in and save Nabil. And so you have these two things that says God can and sometimes does, but if he doesn't, then you and I need to know he always, always has a reason why. God did not stop Jesus' torture or death on the cross. God may not stop your pain either. But you have to know this, that God is big enough that he can. Like, that's not an issue with God. Look at John 19:10. When Jesus was arrested, Pilate says to him, do you not know that I have authority to release you and I have authority to crucify you? And I can imagine Jesus bursting out laughing at this. And Jesus goes, you have no authority over me unless it's been given to you from above. No one has authority to do anything to hurt you or anything unless it comes from above. God can stop it. If he doesn't, he wants to use it. Matthew 26, when they arrested him, Peter gets out his sword and he cuts off the ear of one of the soldiers. And in verse 53, Jesus says, Peter, stop it. Don't you think that I can't call on my Father and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12 legions of angels, which is 70-some thousand big, powerful angels. Like, we got to get this. If we do, it will seriously change the way we look at our life. You and I are 100% going to die someday. Some of us are going to die younger. Some of us are going to die older. That's just the way it is. But during that life, there's going to be things that come in. The loss of a child, the loss of a loved one, the cancer, the whatever it is. And people's lives will change for eternity if they can see how you respond to that. And you respond with your eyes focused on Jesus and eternity. And when you can do that and not fall apart and think God's forgotten you and God hates you, but instead say, God, I know you know exactly what's going on in my body. God, I know you know the heartache I feel right now because of my loss. God, I know, but you know what? Help me to show all the people around me that I'm focused on eternity and not what's temporary on this earth. The fine print when you and I become followers of Jesus is that I will go anywhere you send me, wherever to point people to you. And for many of you, that means you're going to be in the hospital a lot. And for some of you, it might mean you're going to spend time at the morgue or at the mortuary. Some of you are going to spend time in divorce courts or homeless shelters. I want us to understand that following Jesus means you are under his umbrella. Now, this is funny. I put an umbrella out this morning and forgot it, okay? So here was my problem. I was driving in. I was like, I forgot my umbrella. So I text Chris. Now, most of you that know Chris, she's up front. I said, Chris, I forgot my umbrella. Can you bring me one? Well, two things. One, we live in Arizona. The odds of anyone even having one of these is kind of a big deal. It never rains here, okay? So super happy that she had one. But then, knowing Chris, everyone knows Chris, I assumed it would have diamonds all around it. I thought she'd have the blinged out umbrella. Okay, so she brought me this, and this is kind of awesome. But following Jesus actually means this. It means that Philippians 3:20, here's our last verse. But we are different. I don't know if it's up there. It might be in your handout. Maybe I forgot. I might have forgot to put it in. It's a wrong possibility. Philippians 3:20 says this. But we are different because our citizenship is in heaven. We are different because our citizenship is in heaven. I want you never, ever to forget that this earth is so temporary, it just really is. But when we live under God's sovereignty, this whole God is in control of my life, then under this umbrella, I know that God is intricately involved in every single thing that goes on in my life. And I like it when he's involved in good things like Pete when he found his wife or Max when he got his scholarship. But I want you to know that underneath this umbrella, there's pain. And it's still okay because you're still under this umbrella that God says, I know what you're going through and I want to use you. I never want us to forget that there's always, always, always purpose in pain when you are under this umbrella. When you don't have this and you're not a follower of Jesus, you leave yourself wide open to not having any idea and why is this happening and there's no rhyme or there's no reason. And if you are here today and you do not have a relationship with Jesus, I am telling you, get under here. Ask him to come in your life. It's so simple. Jesus, come in my life. I want under this umbrella, but mostly I want to serve you under this umbrella. What can I do to bring other people to get under the umbrella with me? That's kind of our job. Father, thank you so much for this lesson. Thank you for what you're teaching us. But God, I pray that we will go through these days now, changing the way we look at things that happen in our life. And when bad things happen, help us to never forget that you are intricately involved in the bad just as much as the good, and you are desperate for us to be the kind of Christians that point other people to you while we are going through bad situations. I pray for that. In Jesus' name, amen. You have to be reading your Bible. I can't tell you. I always say this. I don't know how it changes us. It just does. The sickness, the tragedy, the death, the kid on drugs, the whatever. God wants to use where did God come from? And if he created us, who created him? And how is that we tend to look at every battle and every problem in this natural realm. Like what I see, but see, we don't get it here because we think Jesus asking him in our life just means I get to go to heaven.